We've got a lot to talk about today. So first of all, welcome to everyone on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, Periscope. We've upgraded the tech. I think we've reached about 6,000 to 7,000 viewers last week. We're shooting for 10,000 this week. I think we'll get there. But yeah, the tech upgrade has been great. So we've got some really cool stuff to talk about. So before we get into, we've already got questions coming in, by the way, people all over the world. So that's great. Keep the questions coming across all the channels. They all get to me here. My team's working on that. So keep the questions coming. I'll get to the first few questions in a minute. We've got some really interesting news. Very exciting week in crypto. It's always tough with everything going on to stay completely focused. I know for me, the work really helps. I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy. This show is not only meant to be useful and fun and interesting. We try to make it as interesting as we can, but hopefully it's a little bit of an escape for everything going on for some of you. And we're going to keep doing the best we can to bring this to you during some crazy times. But let's get into some talking points and then we'll get into some questions. So like I said, lots of crazy things going on, really interesting. One of the biggest news items for the week was the U.S. bank regulator, the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, mouthful. Basically, that's the Treasury Department that oversees national bank charters in the United States. They came out and clarified that national banks, federal savings associations, basically U.S. banks, can actually provide cryptocurrency custody services to their customers. Now, this doesn't mean that they weren't allowed to do it before. It just means that there was not clarity on this. And this is a big deal. This means that banks can now not only service crypto companies like Abra, which obviously they already do because we're in business, but they're not going to be dinged by the U.S. regulators for doing so. And what's really interesting is the acting comptroller of the currency, the head of the U.S. banking regulator, is actually a former Coinbase employee named Brian Brooks. So that's really interesting. He actually made a specific statement as it relates to cryptocurrency. So I'll have more to say on that and happy to take questions on that. That's really interesting. Ethereum's in the news. We'll talk about Ethereum more in a second. Ethereum has become now the most used blockchain. It flipped versus Bitcoin to become the most used. And this is really being driven by stablecoin adoption. The use of Tether and other stablecoins is going through the roof, up dramatically, even versus just a couple of weeks ago. And so DeFi sector is gaining in popularity, but most of the transaction volume on Ether is now coming from stablecoins. Again, more to say about that. Ethereum 2.0 upgrade coming. We'll talk about proof of stake and the implications of that. MasterCard had an interesting announcement. MasterCard has developed a program and they've expanded this program for card issuers to support cryptocurrencies. So if you have a crypto wallet like Abra, for example, in theory, we can give you a MasterCard that would allow you to spend your crypto, potentially access it via cash at an ATM machine, send that money person to person via their money send service. And these are things that we're also looking at for the future. We get a lot of requests for that. That's something that I think is really interesting. And I applaud, I've seen announcements from Visa as well. I really applaud the card networks looking hard at crypto because I think leveraging those existing networks, merchant systems, ATM networks is a big deal. And it helps crypto become part of the traditional or existing payments ecosystem. So as I said, I'm already seeing a lot of questions, for example, on proof of stake. Let me get into that for a second because I think it's related to what I want to talk about with Ethereum for a second. So what is proof of stake? Right. So if you're familiar with Bitcoin, you've probably heard about proof of work. So proof of stake is meant to address some of the most common issues related to proof of work. Proof of work, as a reminder, is the ability to mine Bitcoin based upon doing a certain amount of work on a computer, spending electricity and spending CPU cycles. Generally, you're playing a game. And the first person who wins this game every few minutes wins Bitcoin. The challenges or the kind of criticisms, if you will, of proof of work have to do with this potential for centralization. Remember, the whole point of Bitcoin was meant to be, or is that it's meant to be a decentralized system where there's no central off switch. well, if all the mining is done via one big pool, that kind of represents a centralized off switch. So it's a fairly valid criticism, and this is something I've talked about in the past. So proof of stake is meant to address some of those criticisms by forcing the issue of creating a more decentralized model by using various schemes to determine who would win future issuance of the coins. So for example, you may hold a certain amount of Ether. So once Ethereum migrates to proof of stake, you may hold a certain amount of Ether, and you may have that Ether for a longer time frame than other people who also hold Ether. So they can create a formula which says, okay, for people who have held Ether for a longer time frame, plus they've held a higher amount of Ether, they have a higher chance of mining the next block, for example. And there's different formulas that you can create that allow the system to decide who is going to win. And these formulas can incentivize people to distribute the load across lots of different pools. Now, there's criticisms for proof of stake as well, because there are ways to create large staking pools, and these have already been created for other coins that actually undo some of the benefits in theory of staking. So we're going to dig into this a little bit more, but that's the basic idea behind proof of stake, meaning the amount of crypto that I hold actually determines my chances for mining the next cryptocurrency. So let me get into some other news that we're seeing here, and I do see some more questions coming in. So keep the questions coming. We're going to answer questions throughout. And by the way, the first thing you should do, if you haven't done it already, is download the Abra app. I'm going to be showing a couple of demos on how to do certain things. And next week, by the way, we're going to have some really cool announcements for you, and I'm going to be showing some really cool new features. So this is a particularly good time to be downloading the Abra app. So let me just get into some talking points here. I think this is, like I said, a pretty exciting week in crypto land, and I want to cover a few things. I mentioned I think it was last week. Actually, we skipped last week, but the week before, I talked about this potential for a new kind of altcoin spring, right? Well, we've seen this show before, right? As you've probably seen, if you've seen the Bitcoin chart, its range is getting narrower and narrower. I can bring up the Bitcoin price chart over here, and it's had a good week, by the way, if you haven't been paying attention. But if I bring up the yearly chart for Bitcoin, it's pretty awesome. I mean, like it is less volatile than let me show you. It's less volatile. If I was to bring up a chart, for example, of a bunch of S&P 500 stocks, they would show way more volatility than this. Bitcoin is down 3% over 12 months. There aren't many S&P 500 stocks that are only within 3% of their 1 year range, and Tesla has actually become, I think, the kind of Bitcoin of the S&P 500. And we'll get back to Tesla in a second, but I just wanted to show you that. So we've seen this dance before, right? Bitcoin's range is getting narrower. Now we liken this to a rubber band that's winding up for a huge move, right? And so in the past, we've seen this before, right? When the Bitcoin volatility range narrows, it usually means there's an explosive move coming, and we've seen that explosive move pan out several times before. We did see a bit of a move. I'm going to go back to the chart here. Bitcoin is up. It's up about 4.5% for the week, but it's in that relatively narrow range. It has not broken through. I'd want to see Bitcoin at about 11,000, honestly, before I would say we've broken out, and I expect a huge move to the upside. And I think we're going to get there this year. We'll see. But let's talk about some big moves over the past few days. I've actually got to read these because the prices are changing literally by the minute. So Augur up 45% this month. So the news there is that Augur is releasing soon 2.0 of its prediction market, and holders of the REP token are going to apparently get new tokens. And if you're holding REP on Abra, you don't have to do anything. You should get those tokens swapped out, and your REP balance will remain the same, one for one. So good news there. Well done to the Augur team. Digibyte is up, 25% this month. And apparently there's a deal there where they're working with some exchanges in the Middle East and working on a payment system in the Middle East that looks particularly exciting. kudos to them. I think their push for massive decentralization in micropayments and P2P is particularly interesting. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Doge, everybody's favorite token to shill. Even Elon Musk is getting in on the action, tweeting about Doge, up over 30% this month. Crazy. Tread carefully with Doge. I always hold a little just for fun, but it can. That's going to be one of the more volatile coins over time. So tread a little carefully with Doge, but we love Doge. Golem up 9% this month. They had a research project released by their foundation, which showcased a concept for identity authentication using what they call proof of device. And this is interesting. This uses this Intel SGX technology. If you're not familiar with it, it's really cool. It enables very secure programs to run on a traditional CPU, so that if you're in a trading environment or in a secure messaging environment like in the government, they can use this technology to maintain super secure instruction sets. So that's really interesting. Navcoin up 4% this week, still down from its crazy spike in the year earlier in the year, but it seems to be on a methodical march towards that high again. And their big ambition, of course, is to create a truly decentralized social ecosystem, which includes the DAO Maker project. And so I've been a big fan of the DAO Maker project, and if you're not familiar with it, you can check it out. Now, of course, I have to mention Stellar. Stellar is up about 35% over the past month, continues very impressive growth. I was really fortunate and grateful to be able to participate in the Stellar Development Foundation quarterly update call this week, or actually last week. It was a lot of fun. We gave some updates. We gave some insights and sneak previews as to some big announcements, in particular one that's coming out next week. So I'm not going to give it away here just yet, but for those of you who were on the Stellar call, you may have noticed a couple of screenshots there. And I have to say, I have to mention Tesla, come back to that. So I mentioned in my commentary a couple of weeks ago this idea of Robinhood versus crypto and how people are leveraging Robinhood to get into day trading now, and teenagers doing it. Tesla has clearly broken out as the Bitcoin of the equities world. And Tesla's up something like 4x since the March lows, which is an incredible run. I as a Tesla fan, I can't say that it's necessarily based on fundamentals, but I do see upside over many years, because I think their technology is just so far ahead, like orders of magnitude ahead of the pack. But I think this has basically gotten into insane territory. We'll see what happens. So as I also said, I expect a very big move in Bitcoin over the next 60 days, possibly big moves in both directions, down and then up. But the last two times Bitcoin volatility has reached these lows, it exploded in price soon after. So once it exploded to the downside and once to the upside. And then last time it went to the downside, it then moved up quickly. So I do think that this shrinking volatility is kind of like winding up a rubber band, and you all know what happens when you wind up a rubber band and let it go. So interesting, right? So we'll see where that goes. We're obviously watching closely. Abra volume has been way up on Bitcoin over the last couple of weeks, and so we're excited about that. So as I mentioned a few weeks ago, Ethereum 2.0 is coming. This has created a lot of excitement for Ethereum. Just go to our price chart here. Let's see what's happening with Ethereum in Abra. So if I go to my ETH screen, and right, so ETH is up about 19% this week. Why is ETH up 19% this week? Well, the official testnet for Ethereum 2.0 called Medalla was recently released, and it looks like Ethereum 2.0 may actually be official before the end of the year. So Ethereum 2.0 developers, they also released this official testnet ahead of a presumed end-of-year launch. So again, pretty exciting, right? So Medalla happens to be, by the way, the name of a Buenos Aires metro stop, and we've got a bunch of South American and Argentinian devs at Abra, so shout out to all of you. And this has been multiple years in the making. Now, if you go back and go to abra.blog, in the past, we've written about all of the details as to what's in Ethereum 2.0, the most important change being proof of stake, which I mentioned before. And so, we'll have more to say on proof of stake. Okay, so let's see. Let's get into this now. We've got some more questions here. Let me get into my trusty set of questions. and we'll get rid of Ethereum, come back to you later, come back to my questions. What happens when Bitcoin is lost? Okay, interesting question. So technically, Bitcoin itself can never be lost. Bitcoin is basically a series of transactions that happen on a blockchain, and those get netted to be a balance. You have access to a specific balance via a private key. Now, you can lose the private key. If you lose the private key, the Bitcoin balance is still on the blockchain. It's just that you no longer have access to it. So with Abra, we are custodying your Bitcoin for you, and you are accessing that balance via the Abra app. So there's no Bitcoin to lose. You can lose your backup phrase. So if you lose your phone, we give you a way of recreating your wallet. And this is very important, right? So let me remind all of you, just go into your Abra app. And if you click on the menu in the upper left, you can see the wallet security, which is the fourth item down. And it says view recovery phrase. I'm not going to do that because you didn't see my recovery phrase, but you should be writing down this recovery phrase, storing it somewhere, and then if you get a new phone, you press recover a wallet, you type in the recovery phrase, and your entire Abra balance is recreated. So you must do that. It's the only way to really secure your crypto wallet. Okay, so here's an interesting question. What is ERC-721? Can you explain the difference between ERC-20 and ERC-721? Interesting question. Okay, so if you're familiar with stablecoins, and I'm sure most of you are because we see a ton of usage in stablecoins in Abra, then you're actually using ERC-20. ERC-20 is a smart contract standard on Ethereum, and ERC-721 is another form of smart contract. Let me explain the difference. ERC-20 is basically a smart contract format that allows the issuer to create lots of the same contract, right? So in other words, if I put more dollars in a bank account, I can actually create more Tether to back up those dollars, or I can create more True USD to back up those dollars. So in other words, all of those dollars have equivalent value. Right, so they all look the same, and I can create lots of them, although each one is unique. ERC-721 is known as an NFT contract, non-fungible token. The best way to explain that would be the phrase collectible. Right, so if you've heard of crypto kitties, those are collectibles where each token is completely different, separate, and has nothing to do with any other token. They can be traded, right? But they're not fungible in the sense that one Tether is equal to another Tether, right? One CryptoKitty is not equal to another CryptoKitty. So collectibles are enabled via ERC-721, and stablecoins and other security tokens can be enabled via ERC-20. How is the value, here's another question, how is the value of Ethereum correlated with tokens issued on top of Ethereum? Well, the simple answer is it's not. Right, so I can use Ethereum and spend a tiny amount of gas to basically move tokens around that are worth millions. Right, so there's no correlation directly between the value of Ethereum tokens that are issued on top of the network with Ethereum itself. However, the more Ethereum gets used by moving stablecoins around, the more I'm going to need Ethereum. So that's actually having a halo effect on the price. By the way, I had one question about custody. Somebody mentioned that Abra itself doesn't custody, it outsources the custody. That is correct. So I just want to clarify, when I say that Abra is custodying your crypto, we are outsourcing that to a qualified custodian that is integrated into the Abra network. It's just a seamless integration. So for the user, it obviously looks like it's just part of the Abra app. Okay, so let's take a couple more questions. I've got so many here. Let's see. Good question on Ethereum, by the way. Altcoins on the move. What's different this time beyond the initial ICO boom? That's a really good question. So let me remind everyone what happened with the ICO boom. So when Bitcoin and Ethereum were going up in value back in the 2017 timeframe, a lot of companies were starting to raise money via these initial coin offerings. basically using that ERC20 type of token that I mentioned before. That was a very quick and easy way to raise money. I would posit that a lot of these companies were startups that were pre-product and by definition should not have been raising money via the public. Angel investors and venture capitalists invest in dozens of companies. Now, most of those companies fail. You never hear about them. You only hear about the winners. But if they get one or two winners out of 20 that fail, right, they're actually still making money. But that's not the way people were investing in the ICO market. They were only investing in one or two projects, and when they lost all their money, it didn't, the math didn't work. So ICO model is not a good idea for super early stage investing for most people. There are some exceptions, but for most people. But in any case, as people lost a lot of money doing that, that model just kind of died off. So the altcoin model to me is interesting because it actually creates technology competition that we need to push Bitcoin and Ethereum and other use cases forward, right? So I've talked about Cardano in the past. I've talked about IOTA. I've talked about Digibyte. All of these projects or Stellar have technology nuances to them that I think are very valuable. And these use cases over time will either come to fruition or not. And some maybe won't come to fruition and their project will die, and some will skyrocket, right? So we've seen the price of Cardano go up dramatically in the past few weeks based on the promise that it can do certain things potentially better than Ethereum or Stellar, and we'll see. The price of Stellar is going up dramatically for different reasons as well. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. So another question about Ethereum 2.0. What's the impact of Ethereum 2.0 on ETH and other ERC20 tokens? So a couple of things. As I mentioned, the biggest change for Ethereum 2.0 is around proof of stake. And that basically creates, in theory, a more decentralized Ethereum. We'll see. Ethereum will have the ability to run code on small pieces of the network without having to require the entire network to validate code. That is a more scalable way of doing smart contracts, which will have a positive impact on certain standards like ERC20, ERC721. A lot of the technology is very complex and I think beyond what people really want to get into here. But it definitely is going to have a positive impact on the scalability of Ethereum in general. So let's see, I have a couple more questions and I want to get into a few more talking points. So when is Abra going to have Tezos? That's something that we're looking at. We don't pre-announce when we're going to launch coins, but we work with our custody partners and we look at those coins, and we can only support custodied tokens when they support them. So Tezos is one that's definitely high on our list. We get a lot of requests for that, so stay tuned. Can I recover my money if I forgot my security phrase or password? In general, the answer is no. If you lost your phone and you lose your security phrase, usually we cannot do anything beyond that. However, there are exceptions. You can try to contact support@abra.com. Again, the email is support@abra.com. We'll type that into the chat on the different screens so you can see it. But again, support@abra.com, and tell us what happened. We'll do our best to help you, but it's very important that you take care of that backup phrase. How about offering a MasterCard or Visa debit card? I would love a MasterCard or Visa debit card with my Abra app. So I don't know when, but I would be very surprised if it didn't happen. But I don't know when. I mean, it's offering. I've done this before. Offering a debit card as a fintech company is not easy. It's a lot of work. And remember, Abra has users in 150 countries. So I don't want to offer a debit card that's just available in the US. I want to offer a debit card where I can basically use it in Mexico, in Argentina, in China, in Germany, in the US, and be able to send money and crypto between them, access ATM networks, make purchases online, et cetera, et cetera. So we like to do things global at Abra because we think crypto is global, and we'll see. Do I see Abra partnering, being bought by a federal bank, or seeking its own banking charter? Well, I think clearly banks, look, banks are not early adopters of anything. They tend to do what they're told by regulators. Clearly, anybody in my world always believed that the banks were going to be the last ones to the party. Just because they've been given permission to custody crypto doesn't mean they're going to do it anytime soon. So I don't see Abra being bought by a bank. I don't see Abra being bought by anyone anytime soon. We're really on a mission to go it alone right now, and we're doing great, and we're really excited about our future. So we're not too worried about who's going to buy us in the future, and so that doesn't factor into our thinking at all. Our goal is to build the best product we can build for all of you, and continually take feedback from you to do that. Would we see